Hi, and welcome to Seasons 2 of the Curbside Chat. That's the video podcast series where we talk about the automotive aftermarket critical topics with the people who make it happen. So today we're going to be joined by our chairman, AI Chairman Bob Jaworski, for a new episode of the Curbside Chat. We also have some very special audience members are joining us today. I'm going to say hello to all of the participants from the Automotive Business School of Canada at Georgian College. Welcome. Please reminded that we're going to be taking questions throughout the show. And so be sure to post your question in the QA box. And we're going to do our best to get to all of your questions. And again, I'll take this opportunity to thank our sponsors. Again, this conversation today would not be possible without your continued support. So thank you very much. So without further ado, let's bring our host for today. Good morning, Bob.
Morning, JF, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. Our guest on today's episode is Mike Kealey. Mike is the Executive Vice President, Commercial Division for Dorman Products. I'm going to be chatting with Mike today about some of the biggest challenges and critical issues facing the aftermarket industry today, and what steps we need to be taking as an industry to combat them. Hi, Mike, and welcome to Curbside Chat.
Good morning, Bob. Pleasure to be with you, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you, AIA, for having us. And for giving me the opportunity to talk to the industry about what we think is such an important topic, and a challenge that the aftermarket is going to be faced with in the coming years. So we appreciate the opportunity very much, and really looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Well, let's jump right into it. Mike, we met recently to plan this Curbside Chat, and I could tell right away that you are passionate about the aftermarket. Why is that, and how does it apply to your work at Dorman?
I've always had an interest in cars. I would probably anything with an engine is a better description. And I would guess that interest had come from my father. When I was really young, he did some racing for a period of time. And even after he had given that up, there was always some type of classic car around that was being tinkered with or pampered in some way or another. And it really is that interest that led me into the industry and my first job in the aftermarket. I applied for a position working at a local parts store in my early teenage years. And really the reason why I did that was he and I were about to start a restoration project. And I thought, it'd be a really good way for me to contribute to the effort by, making a few bucks at the auto parts store and maybe getting a discount on a few parts here and there. I would tell you, those things sort of die hard. Today, I'm very much an enthusiast. I enjoy collecting, tinkering, modifying, restoring, but most of all, I really enjoy driving, preferably at high rates of speed. And I think, that translates well here. At Dorman, we take a ton of pride in our products and really in providing solutions that help our end user customers. And I think that one of the things that helps contribute to our culture here is that we truly are a collection of enthusiasts, right, who really enjoy just looking for practical solutions to sort of common everyday repair problems. And that's what our business is based on.
That's great. You really are a car guy. So it's interesting over my time in the industry, how many people that really that's their passion are cars, and that's why they love being in this industry. So many of us are familiar with Dorman, but can you give us a little background on Dorman's history, where the company is today, and where you see the company heading into the future?
Sure. Dorman was founded in 1918, just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, by two brothers, Jack and Lou Dorman. And my understanding is that initially the business was sort of struggling to find its footing, was sort of selling some Me Too type products. And it wasn't until they introduced a product called the Star Washer that the company really found its footing. And that Star Washer was a product that was designed to create tension between two mating parts and keep them from separating, with all the vibrations on a vehicle. R&B, which is sort of the company that I consider myself to work for, was founded in 1978, just outside of Philadelphia, also by two brothers, Richard and Stephen Berman. And very much like the Dorman brothers, when the company was first founded, they were sort of struggling to find their fit. And, legend around here has it that, at one point they were making a visit to a parts store, and a customer had come in and held up a window crank handle. I actually have one here. It's our first part. And the customer came in and said, "Help, I need one of these." And, the two brothers sort of heard the counter person respond that you'd have to go back to the OE dealer to get that part. And essentially, a company was born from that window crank handle, right? That idea of there was all types of products that were needed in the space that people just couldn't get, and that the OE dealer was the only option. R&B eventually acquired Dorman in 1994, and it's sort of always been interesting to me how, two companies that were founded 60 years and a couple hundred miles apart from one another really it was such a natural fit, sort of given, their similar starts and philosophies. Today, we continue to be focused on bringing those same type of hard to find items into the aftermarket. With respect to where we're headed, for much of our history, we were wholly focused on light duty aftermarket replacement parts. But I would tell you today, we see a lot of opportunity in some adjacent sectors like heavy duty vehicles or, class 6 through 8 vehicles. And historically, we had added value through application engineering, right? We sourced a lot of components. Maybe we did some finish assembly. We put kits together, and we added a lot of value through sort of defining the year, make, model, and fit of certain products. Today, however, we've become a very capable, product design, development, and manufacturing firm. I have almost 400 contributors, globally, working every day to bring new product ideas into the aftermarket. I would tell you, I'm very comfortable with our capabilities around mechanical products, but we're sort of in a constant state of rethinking our processes and capabilities around advanced electronics. So today, as a result of really that, a large portion of our investments are being made in next generation aftermarket capabilities. So, we're working on things like radar design and how we create radar design capabilities so that we're able to work on and ultimately bring next generation products into the aftermarket, for the technologies that are coming off the OE assembly line today. I'm coming to you from our proving grounds here, where we do a lot of test fixtures and try-ons. Maybe my most favorite space inside of our headquarters here. But it's interesting, what is over my right shoulder here, this rack behind me, is an example of that type of investment, right? So what this rack is really the exact same thing as that Silverado truck that's behind me. Every module, everything that's on that vehicle's network is represented in that rack physically, so that we can monitor, communications and protocols that go across that vehicle's network, and ultimately design the products we need to bring to you, our customers.
Well, I know for sure your engineers have been extremely busy, because I see what the amount of SKUs we've been adding to our inventory. So good on them and good on Dorman for continuing to bring new products to the marketplace for our aftermarket. So the car is changing, and so is the aftermarket. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges the broader industry is facing moving forward?
Great question. Certainly one that, we spend a lot of time thinking about. There's always the headline risks. Some of them are new, and some of them have been around for just about as long as I can remember. The industry has been talking about really the tech shortage for what seems like forever. And we do really have a significant shortage of well-trained aftermarket technicians. And given the rate of technological change really that's taken place on the modern vehicle fleet, I think it's an issue that the industry really needs to come together and rally around. So, whether that's manufacturers and distributors partnering together on enhanced training programs, or education for those who are thinking about their career options, so that we can attract people into the trade. I think we need to do a better job as an industry of attracting talent. This is definitely a large strategic priority for us. Technician training is something that we've really been heavily focused on for the last couple of years, and something that we will continue to invest in. EVs at some point will certainly change the maintenance business, and likely change a bit the replacement parts that we all sell. But it is at least our opinion that transition will be slow. And we certainly think the aftermarket and the industry at large is going to have plenty of time to adapt to new opportunities that those drive architectures ultimately present. One thing I would say we've always tried to do here at Dorman is sort of be make, model, and technology agnostic, right? So in other words, if a product fails, we think it should be our mission to bring that product to market, regardless of what it fits, regardless of the underlying manufacturing technologies and processes. And we intend to continue that mindset and really be drive architecture agnostic as well, right? So as those vehicles make their way into the aftermarket fleet, we want to identify the opportunities they present, and ultimately make sure that our industry has the products and know-how necessary to service them. We hear a lot about things like ride sharing and fractional vehicle ownership. And they sort of get pointed to as something that may ultimately depress the total number of vehicles on the road. But especially, in a post-pandemic world, I would guess the individual commuter car is going to remain vitally important to people, and perhaps maybe even more important than ever. As a company, we think the headline risks are real, but more than manageable. And I think, for nimble businesses at all levels of the aftermarket, I think new opportunities are going to continue to present themselves as a result of all this change. I do think it is important for us as an industry to remember that oftentimes the headlines turn out to be a bit outlandish when you look back on, right? If you search headlines from just a few years ago about autonomous vehicles, you'd find that by now all of us were supposed to be passengers in our own cars, right? Essentially, they'd be self-operating by now. And so, the headlines sometimes turn out to be quite a bit overblown. There is, however, I would say one particular area that concerns us as a company and me personally, and it has to do with the software that essentially controls all the functionality on today's vehicles. As an industry, we talk quite a bit about telematics, and the need for equal access to data, and the data that your car is creating. And, obviously it's an important, critical topic for us as an industry, but we really never talk about the software that runs the car. So for lack of a better analogy, think about Microsoft Windows and Excel as the car's embedded software, and think about the spreadsheet that you create with that software, as the data that's being collected by the car. The software is important because it runs the hardware. And on just about every vehicle system, what was once a function that was performed manually, right? I mean, take the same window crank handle, or maybe at some point through an analog signal, it's now all controlled by microprocessors, right? So if you look at this, which is sort of, I hope you can see this, it's sort of an example of a current generation window lift motor, and all the functionality that had been, that you used to do either with your arm or maybe through a simple voltage signal is now controlled by a PCBA with embedded software. So for us to continue to effectively create replacement products and solutions, we're going to need to be able to identify all the necessary features, functions, and interfaces of these products, then lay out the physical hardware, and finally write the software that's going to replicate all those original functions. That software cannot be created unless we have access to the vehicle's network. And we are already starting to see the beginning of the OEs restricting that network access. And so that is a challenge that is really front and center for us, and one that doesn't get a lot of publicity, doesn't get a lot of conversation in the space.
Good. Well, I guess great insight on that, Mike. I know that as an aftermarket, we've always adapted in the past, and I've heard it mentioned many times before that we were told we'd not be able to continue to fix cars in the aftermarket, and go back and look. Well, that fuel injection, ABS brakes, all those things were there, but I guess with the change with the technology, the electronics, is it going to be different this time?
The aftermarket has certainly proven its resiliency. And I think as an industry, when we rally around a challenge, we have always done a great job in sort of meeting those challenges. If you look at Right to Repair as an example, either the early version of Right to Repair or the current work that's in process, they're really great examples of what we can do when we come together. So I certainly wouldn't bet against us as an industry. But the industry really can't rally around a topic that's not being discussed or understood. And that's a big concern when I think about this particular situation, right? So just to sort of contrast to one of the examples you cited, let's take the headline from yesteryear about fuel injection and its ability to hurt the industry. In that scenario, while it was new technology, and it was going to sort of remove all those lucrative carburetor rebuilds from the business, we still knew how to reverse engineer and design effective aftermarket solutions for that technology, right? Essentially the same processes we had always used could be leveraged to create aftermarket injectors and pressure regulators and fuel rails. In the present day software situation, however, or all these devices that are controlled by software, the ability to design an aftermarket part may actually no longer exist. And I think that's what the difference is. So let me try and simplify the situation a bit. When the OEM and Tier 1 partner together to create a product that is software controlled, they have a fully defined feature and function set, right? So they essentially know what that device will do, when it will do it, and under what set of circumstances. When that part ages and fails and requires an aftermarket solution, the aftermarket manufacturer does not get that feature and function information from the OEs or from the Tier 1. We have to put it together, right? We have to build the blocks or reverse engineer what the device is doing. The only way we're able to do that is by monitoring the vehicle's network, right? So we have to listen for the signals. We have to listen to the communications that are going back and forth from the targeted product. It's a time-consuming process, right, as you can imagine, because we have to understand what is happening under all circumstances, under all different condition sets. After sometimes what are hundreds of hours of this work, we will finally have the features and functions fully identified and built out, and from there we can write our own software that will eventually replicate the original functionality. There's really three big concerns moving forward. So first is the idea of the restricted network, right? We all know the fears that exist over vehicle network security, especially as they start to communicate more and more with devices remotely. And one of the ways you sort of combat those security fears is either to restrict access through either a physical firewall or through some type of encryption. And we're starting to see that take place on some current generation cars. Either way, in either scenario, the firewall or the encryption, if we can't understand or access those communications, we can't write software. In that situation, it means no aftermarket part. And that's the difference right this time. If this plays out, we no longer have the ability to create aftermarket replacement parts, at least those that are software controlled. And it's no small subset of items, right? It's one that's growing significantly year over year. And, you know, an aftermarket with no aftermarket parts seems to be a lot less valuable to the end consumer than we typically have been, right? So that's, you know, that's what drives a lot of our concern around the restricted access. You know, second is many automotive components have latent features built into them. You know, and those features are built in the software. So for example, you know, you perform this function or that function only in the event of a collision. Since it's really impractical for us to be crashing vehicles to identify these features, it's likely that anything that has feature latency, especially if it could be safety critical, is simply not pursued by aftermarket manufacturers. Again, it means no aftermarket part option. And sort of last but not least is the expansion of over-the-air updates. You know, many of us are used to our cars updating their GPS maps over the air. Right? You get in your car, it says your maps have been updated to the newest version. But we're going to need to get used to our cars updating their software over the air, just like our phones do. Right? So one of the reasons why we have yet to see this is because the bandwidth required to do so hasn't been present. But with current generation vehicles coming with 5G technology and enough bandwidth inside of the vehicle, this is really right on the horizon. Sort of the simplest way I can explain why we should care about this is to use our phones as an analogy. When iOS is updated, all of your apps automatically update to interface correctly with the new version of software. That's possible because, you know, app developers and the computing OE in this case partner together so that they have advanced access to, you know, sort of beta software versions so that when it goes into production release, their apps can function. You know, those apps that are no longer supported won't work with the current software update, post a phone update. So imagine we produce an ABS module with software that's designed to work with General Motors operating system version 1.0. And then GM pushes an update to their vehicle fleet that moves those vehicles to General Motors operating system version 2.0. That update could effectively render the aftermarket part inoperable, right? If we don't have any notification or any communication with General Motors. And in a scenario like that, who's gonna want to choose an aftermarket part?
Yeah, great comments. Certainly challenges facing, you know, and I guess maybe that'll tie into my next question, but, you know, what are the steps we should be taking as an industry to try and help combat some of these challenges that we're likely to face really in the near term, not necessarily even long term, but in the near term?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bob. You know, first and foremost, I think for the industry to recognize it as a critical issue and one that rises to the level that we prioritize it as an industry, you know, we're going to have to promote awareness around the topic and the subject, and you know that's why events like this, you know, for me are really important things for us to be doing. Somehow we have got to get the OEs to recognize that there is a real need for the aftermarket to continue to have access to on-vehicle networks. You know, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get the OEs to that point without some type of legislative or regulatory pressure. You know, I think the best way for us to drive that type of action may be through some type of consumer awareness campaign. Really, you know, that really turns this into a consumer rights issue. You know, think about your data, your choice in that campaign. You know, in other words, if the aftermarket can't retain network access and build replacement parts, consumer choice is severely impacted, and they're going to be forced back into the OEMs for parts and service. You know, that being said, the cybersecurity threat is real, right? But other industries have figured out how to create trusted developer programs to allow access to software and systems for good actors while keeping bad actors out and the network secure. So in the end, if we had a developer program, almost something like how application or peripheral providers interface with computing OEMs to build product and software suites that work in their computing environments, I think we could continue to build products, ones that are safe and secure, and in the end, updatable in an over-the-air environment. So some type of meaningful partnership between the aftermarket and the OEs seems to be a must. And in the end, I actually think it would be good for everyone in the repair chain, including the OEs and the tier ones. I mean, if you think about the automotive product life cycle, cars remain commuters for 25, 30 years post-production. Now think about the technology product life cycle, right? Goods are obsoleted and retired in a small fraction of that time. So now, sort of think about all the microprocessors that are running around on the current generation of vehicles that chip manufacturers have already sunset, right? Those microprocessors are no longer available and can no longer be procured to make the original part. And I'm not even talking about in today's microprocessor constrained world, right? So how are we going to be able to service all these products in the future, whether it's aftermarket or OE, without an aftermarket that's equipped to develop replacement parts when these components are eventually sunset?
Yeah, it's a great point. We've got a lot of students on the call today, and I think that maybe the next question will apply directly to them is, what can the next generation of people entering the workforce do to prepare? What skills and knowledge do you think should be their primary focus?
Bob, I've had basically 2 jobs my whole life, so I'm not sure I'm qualified to give career advice. It's probably going to sound a little bit cliche. Spend time really thinking about what you're passionate about, right? Work in an industry that you truly care about, I would say is first and foremost. If the automotive industry is your calling, give a great deal of thought in terms of what part you want to play. Do you like design? Do you like to take things apart? Are you more hands-on? Is storytelling your passion, right? I mean, marketing and how we connect with our customers socially and through all kinds of new mediums is becoming a more increasingly important component of how we interface with our customers. So I think the opportunities here are really endless. I think the specific skills and knowledge need to then flow from there, right? But there are a few things, in my opinion, that are going to be critical regardless of your chosen discipline. Be very comfortable being uncomfortable. There's no better learning than experiential learning, and that happens through stretch experiences and failure, right? It's the only way to do it. Find those around you who are currently where you want to be, and try not to leave their side. And if they don't want you there, or you're in a situation where you can't get that kind of stretch experience, find another opportunity. Find another opportunity for growth. One last thing I would tell you is what you do in the first years of your career are going to be critical in sort of how your career takes shape and evolves. It's sort of like saving for retirement in that regard. Get off to a good start. And you have no bigger advocate than yourself, right? No one else has responsibility for your career development. You need to own that. Others are going to have to help you, but you have to take ownership for it. So, that's the advice I would give prospective entrants.
Great insight and comments, Mike. I can say just from my own personal experience that, I've been in this job for over 35 years, and you never stop learning. Every day is an opportunity to learn something new, find a better way to do it. So I guess that would be my insight too, is you need to be a lifelong learner in this industry, because one of the greatest challenges of it is the fact that things continue to change. But that's also one of the best parts of the whole industry too. So
good advice.
So recently, the government of Canada was considering changes to the Copyright Act, so it would not be illegal to reverse engineer or break software. Copyright Act, so it would not be illegal. To create new measures and develop parts. Is that part of the solution?
Yeah, I definitely think that's part of the equation. You know, the Canadian situation is a little bit different than what we have here in the U.S. But so the way I understand the situation in Canada is that there's sort of proposed legislation in place now that still has to undergo several rounds of review and commentary prior to making its way into the Senate. But that the legislation does allow for security feature circumvention for the purposes of repair. That's similar to the exemption that was issued by the U.S. Copyright Office, I think a little over a year ago during their last review process. The big difference being that U.S. Copyright Office can't issue, right, they can't write law. They can issue exemptions, and those exemptions expire. They only last for 3 years. But, you know, if Canada is able to get that legislation signed into law, you know, that becomes a permanent thing unless it's then changed again. I would say, you know, keep in mind that this mainly applies to complex electronics products that can be remanufactured, right, since it's a repair exemption. It does not apply to circumvention for the purposes of new product development. So while it's helpful on a small subset of parts, it falls far short, you know, of really providing a solution for the larger issue of continued product development.
Yep. Well, another question, kind of back to the situation. We're having lots of students in attendance today, you know, who are considering a career in the automotive industry, and obviously they have choices where they want to work. But what would you say is more appealing for a newcomer in working for a manufacturer of aftermarket parts versus an OEM manufacturer or a dealership network?
Well, you know, first and foremost, you know, obviously I have tremendous respect for what the OEMs do. And I believe, you know, the entire automotive industry, inclusive of all of us, is really an attractive space. You know, with that said, admittedly, I'm very biased, right, being an aftermarket lifer. You know, I think the diversity in the aftermarket is something that makes the industry incredibly exciting, right? So we have the opportunity to work across all makes, all models, across all different vehicle systems. We get to learn what each one does well, and in many cases get to improve upon what was originally done. Also, you know, I think our industry is a bit less cyclical than most, right? And as a result, provides great stability. You know, for the most part, we do well in a strong economy, and we also do well in a downturn, right, as people hold those used assets a little bit longer. You know, if you like shiny objects, there's a sector of this industry that's for you, right, on the customization front, certainly on the SEMA side of the business. So there's really something for everyone here, I think, in this space. And, you know, if you're a tech head, what other spaces provide the opportunity to essentially work on a day-to-day basis with what is essentially a supercomputer on wheels, right? So we have a little bit of everything in this industry, and you know, the opportunities are really endless, especially given the rate of change, right? I mean, if you can make a difference somewhere, you can make a difference in this business.
Well said, Mike. I think, you know, that's my experience over the years, the vastness and the opportunities that lie within the aftermarket. You know, it's unlimited. It's what do you want to do? The opportunity is there to be able to do it in the aftermarket. So great comments. So just let's check in to see if we have any questions from the audience before we wrap things up.
Great conversation, Mike and Bob. But thank you for all of these insights about how the evolutions of this industry has been impacted by changes in technology. Very, very interesting. So, no question at this point. We're going to we are going to transition right away to our rapid fire question. Back to you, Bob.
Perfect. All right, Mike, we have 5 questions. Tell us the first thing that comes to mind, and you have 2 minutes to answer all the questions. First, make and model of your first car.
Subaru GL.
Subaru GL.
Yeah, with a failing oil pump. I still remember the noise very vividly.
That's what keeps the aftermarket going. What is your favorite thing about working in the automotive industry?
There's days I think I have the best job in the aftermarket because I get to take all kinds of things apart. I get to touch all kinds of cool things. If you're a kid that enjoyed erector sets, look at the stuff I get to work on a day-to-day basis. So, that's what keeps me excited about it.
Great. What advice would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Have more humility. Listen, take criticism, be honest with yourself and look for opportunities for improvement. I think, as we get a little older, humility comes with time. And I wish I had that insight a little bit earlier.
Great. What are you terrible at, but love to do anyway?
Oh, man. I don't know.
Mike, would it be cooking?
I know I don't like to do it, so that's not one of them. I don't know. Maybe
golf. You like the golf?
I'm a bad artist. I'm a terrible artist. I wish I could draw, but I have trouble drawing stick figures. So that's certainly something I wish I could do better.
Okay, and your final question: what is the best personal or professional development book you've ever read?
Grit. Angela Duckworth.
Yeah, good one. Well, Mike, thanks for taking the time to join us here today on Curbside Chat. You've provided us with some great insights on how we can work together as an industry to face these critical issues head on and handle these challenges moving forward. On behalf of myself and the AIA Canada, I also want to thank all those attendees who tuned in today to watch this episode of Curbside Chat. And for the students in our audience today, don't go anywhere just yet. Mike's going to stay on and answer any burning questions you may have. Till next time, everyone, stay safe.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. Again, please stay. We're going to be right back after a 60-second pause, answering a lot of the questions we got from the students while Mike was having a conversation with Bob. So we're just going to grab a quick drink and be right back in 60 seconds.